If we could do a roll call, please. Turn your mic on.
Jeff Swearingen,
Here.
Patrick Updike,
Here on the phone.
David Lorenzen, Marty Smith,
Present.
Tom Lampy,
Here.
John Benson, Bob Van Wolfrat,
Ryan Dreiling attending for Bob Van Wolfrat.
Denise Pavlik,
Here on the phone.
Andy Buffington,
Here.
Ellen Hagan,
Here.
Deb Craybill, David Ness,
Here.
Jason Leonard,
Here.
Ted Kamachis,
Present.
Michael Casper,
Present by telephone.
Carol Lund Smith,
Here.
Linda Frederickson,
Here by telephone.
Kelly Grosskirth, Senator Feenstra,
I don't know anywhere you want to sit.
Senator Brace, Representative Kressig, Representative Holt, Craig Allen,
Here by phone.
Helen Taranovich,
Sherry, did you know Chief Lorenzen just walked in?
you have a quorum.
Thank you. Introduction of board members. Start at the end.
Carol Lund Smith, Iowa Law Enforcement Academy.
Andy Buffington, Winnebago and Hancock County, representing communication centers.
Ellen Hagan, Joe Fire and Rescue, representing volunteer firefighters.
Jason Leonard from the Waverly Police Department, representing Municipal Police.
Thomas Lampy, DPS.
Ted Comanche, Sheriff, Marshall County, representing the Iowa State Sheriffs and Deputies Association.
Dave Lorenzen with Motor Vehicle Enforcement, representing the DOT.
Jeff Swearingen, Iowa Department of Natural Resources.
Yeah.
Dave Ness in one place, municipal. Marty Schmidt, Department of Public Health.
Our board members that are on the phone.
Patrick Updike, Iowa Department of Corrections.
Michael
Frederickson.
Okay.
Denise Pavlik, Emergency Communications Center, representing Communication Centers.
Okay, welcome everybody. I'm looking for the approval of today's agenda, and I do have one change. I would like to add under new business consultant funding, which our consultant is Federal Engineering. We need to obtain some more funding from our budget to continue to have Federal Engineering as our consultant for the radio system. We'll be discussing that today. I'm looking for approval for today's agenda with that one addition.
Mr. Chair, I'll approve. Make a motion.
Have a second?
Second.
Okay, Andy. Any more discussion on that? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Approval of the meeting minutes from July 14th, 2016. Motion to approve those. Should have those in front of you. If you have not obtained a copy, there's one on the table. Motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Okay, Ellen? You have a second?
Second.
Jason? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, SWIC report, Mr. Allen, you still on the phone from Arizona, I assume?
Yes, sir.
Go ahead. Yes, we can.
Very good. I spent most of the, in fact, all of this month working on the LMR and FirstNet initiative, along with some activities in administration. The lion's share of the work is working with the user group committee, aligning the requirements for applicants to use the system and the necessary components of not just users, but the overall system management that may take place. I have to ask, is there a terrible feedback coming from the prison line?
Very choppy.
No, I'm going to leave that report and do a better job of giving this next time because the audio is terrible.
Is he done? Okay, we can move on. Deputy Swick, Helen, are you available? Come to the podium, please.
Good morning. The month of August brought us additional work in the public safety research, communications research on the user interface for public safety. We made advances onto 5 years, 10 years, and 15 years into the future. We've been talking about how artificial intelligence will affect the public safety sector, how virtual reality and augmented reality will change the way that first responders have used their user interface, and also wearables and different technologies that will affect them. It's one of the most exciting weekly calls I'm on. So, and there's different folks from industry, from National Institutes of Standards and Technology, from DHS Science and Technology. It's an excellent. We're doing a roadmap, so there will be a report that's generated out of this, a national report from PSCR, and Iowa will be represented because we do have to provide feedback and do research. And one of the things that Iowa's researched for them was my area of interest was where we're going with quantum computing and how that's going to speed. You know, you've got your LTE networks going from 4G to 5G by 2020, 2025. 2020, the standards will be ready. 2025, it may hit the streets or the airwaves, however you want to look at it. And then how that tracks with quantum computing and how fast the chips are getting, the chipsets and the UIs and how things are done at the edge. So it's all very exciting that Iowa gets to be a part of that and that we have a voice in the roadmap for what our first responders are going to be holding in their hands. So that's a very interesting thing we're doing there. For the monthly chair reports, I'm going to go ahead and give the reports that I have, and then Rob Dennert will give Rick one since he's here. Brian has been a very busy lad in August. Brian Blodgett is our Region 2 chair. He attended our QPP FEMA Region 7 meeting that Iowa, it was really the FirstNet subcommittee, put that together with FirstNet to host that FEMA Region 7 meeting here in Iowa. Brian represented the FirstNet committee when we had one of the members, Captain Walzer, went elsewhere. So Brian stepped in and he was there. I also saw him at the FirstNet meeting yesterday because he happened to be in Des Moines. So for a Region 2 chair, the man gets around. So he's been busy, and he's been very busy doing a lot of outreach for FirstNet. Brian and Joel Roney, the chair and vice chair of Region 2, do more outreach for FirstNet than I think the board is really aware. I've done presentations, I've given them presentations and designed presentations for them that they've taken to the ICIT, they've taken them to the EMAs in their area, and they're even talking about doing something for APCO, the upcoming APCO meeting about WISE. So they're very good into what he said on his update is they continue to meet monthly and do outreach and information via their IT group, which is ICIT. They contact their EMA groups and give them the outreach information, and the sheriffs and the other groups in the region. The information updates from this last month include the LMR talk group assignment ideas. So that was something they were involved in. Brian was involved in user group, but also they had in his own meeting, they talked about talk group assignment and fleet mapping. And then some good discussions around the FirstNet QPP. So that was the RIC 2 report. For Region 3, we were vacant on a chair for several months, and I'm happy to report that as of 2 weeks ago, the Region 3 members voted in Glenn Sedevy. He's a Woodbury Communications Director, and he is now the Region 3 Chair. And this is something that Sean Olson reported to me yesterday afternoon. So we had originally, Swick Allen and I met with Glenn after the board meeting last week because he had some questions about what it meant to be a RIC chair. And so we answered his questions prior. So he was actually nominated by Sean, and but it had to go through, they went through an email voting process as opposed to calling a special meeting. So, and so Glenn, we welcome you to our Region 3 chairmanship, and we look forward to working with him, and we've already started working with him on some other things. Doug Reed reported that he did, although he did not have a meeting last week, he did send out to his team the QPP link for the recorded session that we had, and he did send out the link for the PDF, and his next meeting will be, they're planning on meeting in September. There's something about some of the members were gone for, there was an APCO conference or something, there was a contradiction for scheduling in August. Region 5, I had one member come to that meeting, that was Larry Smith. And Larry wanted to attend a meeting that was a more populous meeting. So, because Region 5 hasn't been well attended. So I asked Doug Reed if we could have Larry come to his next meeting in September. So that's what we're planning on doing. And so I'm arranging that with Doug. And then Region 6, Eric had nothing to report. Eric doesn't hold, he's a vice chair. He doesn't have a chair at this time. He doesn't hold regular meetings, and he finds little interest in regular regional meetings in that region. But Eric does participate in the UGC, and he does participate in ISICS activities. So that's my report, and I'll take any questions. And
So we're without chairs and RIC 1, 4.
no, RIC 1 has a chair.
Okay.
Region 5 and Region 6 do not have chairs at
Okay.
this time.
Okay.
Region 5 is considering a co-chair, maybe having 2 people co-chair. We do have a vice chair, Jim Mitchell. Region 6 doesn't have a chair, but we do have a vice chair, Eric Dow.
Okay.
And I do have that on that's on the G drive.
Okay. Mr. Dennert behind you there?
Yes.
I'd like to.
Thanks. Rob Dennett, Region 1, RIC Chair. The report from our regional meeting. This last meeting, quite a topic that came up about the National Weather Service and Metro Incident Command radio network that exists here in central Iowa. The Weather Service approached the Micron Executive Committee about what its future could be here in central Iowa. It was formed after the floods of '93 and existed on a commercial SMR network here in the area since '93. And knowing about the ISICS platform, they were wondering what their future could be, both for Micron as a network here in central Iowa, but also for the National Weather Service. And our discussions led us to, it didn't appear that people had direct radio communication with the National Weather Service in most other places around the state. And the Weather Service believed that that was valuable. We have found it valuable here in central Iowa. And the discussion sort of spawned into, why not get all of the 5 National Weather Service offices around the state onto the ISICS platform? And the Weather Service seems very interested in that. I think from a responder's perspective, could be a very good thing. So that was quite a lengthy discussion at our last RIC, and I think we've carried it on to the UGC, and I think we'll be making accommodations for the Weather Service to be on the platform and available to other users on the platform then. So I think it's that good traction is starting to gain on, here's some of these other users that I don't think we would have ever thought of that are valuable users on the platform.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other RIC chairs or vice chairs here today? Then Rob? Okay. Blake, or 911 Council report.
Good morning, Blake DeRucci, Iowa Homeland Security Emergency Management, 911 Program Manager. Just a few things for you today. The administrative rules hearing for the legislation that was passed earlier this year is set for September 13th, if anyone is interested, somewhere between 11 and 12 at room 116 in the Capitol. Probably of more interest, we approved 17 grants today. 5 of those directly are basically applications to get onto the statewide ISICS platform. There's a couple more procedural things that we're working with to get full approval to make sure that we're spending that money, and after we spend that money, they'll be able to access the radio network. But working between Chair Lampy and Andy Buffington, will be able to hammer those out and get those approved. So far we've approved $3.3 million out of the allotted $4.4 million for this year. Also tasked in the legislation was for us to do a consolidation study, both looking at virtual or shared services as well as physical. We've set the workshops for those, and this is, we're trying to cast a very wide net here, so it's gone out to all of our various distribution lists, but by all means, if you have people that might be interested in attending, it's very applicable. Those are set for September 27th in Sioux City, September 29th in Cedar Rapids. October 7th, we'll actually have 2 sessions, both at the State Emergency Operations Center, a morning session, which will be a general session, and then in the afternoon, which is going to be primarily focused on vendors. And they're all open public meetings. By all means, you can attend whatever you want, but we're just kind of trying to target vendors at that one. And then one final one, October 24th at the Ramada Tropics off of Merle Hay. That's kind of in conjunction with the Iowa APCO-NENA conference, so another one that morning. Couple other things. Also then on the afternoon of October 24th is our office traditionally does a 911 program update or training session. That's also in conjunction with the Iowa APCO-NENA conference. That will be in the afternoon of the 24th. So kind of 2 different things that 24th at the Ramada. Something that I think Stephen Ray would normally report out on, but I want to mention, we are going to continue to hold our meeting in October as scheduled. A lot of times that meeting we also hold in conjunction with Iowa APCO-NENA. We're going to hold it just as scheduled on October 13th at 9 o'clock. So we will have that going on here before your guys' meetings. Any questions for me? Thanks.
Okay, we'll move on to the user group committee.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. A lot of discussion going on at the user group committee level right now, and I don't know, I guess I will have to talk with Motorola a little bit, but getting in preparation for the optimization DDR coming up here in a few weeks, we're talking at length and in depth about device ID allocation, talk group allocation, as well as some of the things that we need to iron out, specifically interop talk groups, where their locations and things like that. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done. There's a lot of stuff that's really, until that optimization DDR has taken place, that those decisions will be made during that time, I believe. And again, not visiting with Mr. Mercado specifically about that, it's almost guesswork for us. However, we have a lot of discussion about it. I think we're very close to resolutions on allocations, how we're going to set up those device IDs, and basically that naming convention that's going on that will obviously come to the board through the DDR and through UGC as everyone's trying to work cooperatively. Obviously, we're talking with technology, we're talking with governance, we're talking with operations as much as we can. We're trying to share information and not leave anybody out, but there's a lot of stuff on our plate right now trying to get that ironed out. I echo what Rob said. You know, he brought to the UGC the idea of using, having a talk group created specifically for the National Weather Service and the 5 offices that serve the state of Iowa. I think it's 5, if not 6. That also opens up things like the HAN. I mean, that's something that, do we migrate that into the LMR ISICS platform or not? And there's going to be hopefully a lot of other things like that that we'll have available for the users. So that's really the board report. I'm also pleased that we will have the first applicant, and that's coming in front of the board this morning. Dallas County has submitted their application. They've submitted all their materials. They've actually they did a wonderful presentation last month at the Orrin Pate building, and the user group committee recommends that Dallas County be approved for ISICS access. So with that, there needs to be formal board action. I assume we'll do that at this time, Mr. Chair.
Sure. So you're saying that Dallas County has passed the application process? Your committee has approved them for a user on ISICS?
Yes, they have.
Okay. I'll entertain a motion for Dallas County to be allowed to access the ISICS platform. Okay. I have one on the floor. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Helen. Is there any more discussion? Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes.
Thank you. With that, you know, the user group committee is going to continue to work as diligently as possible with the vendor as well as Dallas County. They're right at the point of their need to start programming their system and their radios. I'm in communications with Terry McClanahan, who's here today, about trying to get some of these things done. And it's a hurry up and wait, and I appreciate Dallas County's patience with us as they are the alpha partner for us. They're the ones that are going to blaze the trail in the state of Iowa and show us all how it's done. So I appreciate everything that Dallas County's done. And also, just lastly, the application process. Helen did some work this morning that she showed me about. On the ISICS website, there is an applicant section under the LMR platform. So you can go on and you can get a sample letter of intent. That letter of intent needs to be sent to Chair Lampe. Once Chair Lampe receives that, he will in turn let me know, and then as UGC chair, I forward on the memorandum of agreement as well as the matrix of users. One of the things I want to echo through with Swick Allen and I have had conversation about is that matrix of users, when you first look at it, it can be relatively confusing. Swick Allen is hoping that if any questions, concerns, or recommendations on that form, that you please contact him. His number's on the bottom of that, and then we'll work through. After that's done, once that information gets back to the user group committee, then we will have it on our agenda for approval. And then what we're going to do is been working with Blake, the program manager for 911 in the state, to make sure that through his grant process that we have some certifications, some sort of documentation, so that as he awards those funds, that he knows that it's been through our process as well. So if there's no questions, that's all I have, Mr. Chair.
I do have one for you, Andy.
Sir.
Along the lines of protocols and forms, as you know, we like to look for best practice. There's no reason that we need to stumble and fall and make mistakes, because we're probably one of the last states that have a statewide, but there's states that are 15 years into their systems. So lots of examples out there, and I think we paid federal engineering some money to do that research for us. Would your committee consider adopting either a state or city or county that has done it in the past, their forms, their policies, their protocols, their user lists, that we could, I'll just say, rob from them because they encourage us to do that? Because Ohio, for example, they're thankful that we called them in for that meeting, because you guys are doing it right. You're asking questions. You're not doing this yourself, because, to be quite frank, we've done this. You don't need to make the mistakes we did. But there's also the forms, and everything's out there for us to use. Would your committee consider adopting a state's or a combination of states' forms that we can use to get going, and then adapt to those forms by merely just changing from ISICS or from Armor to ISICS, and then kind of going through those to get a baseline going here, so we don't have to stall any progress that because we're getting slammed with these applications, and we're going to get slammed pretty hard here in the next year. So if we have something in place going off best practice, I guess I'm asking if your committee would entertain something like that, adopting a policy of some state.
Absolutely, and that's one of the things that you and I have had offline conversations about is I've looked at Minnesota, obviously, because I border Minnesota. I'm interested in that. I've had conversations with them. Obviously, Ohio, Illinois, Michigan, federal did, I'm reviewing that information that federal did a study on Minnesota and Michigan. But the reality, and it's one of the things I've had conversations with the chair about, is I still have a full-time job. So I've got people that pay me to do certain things, and I have to make sure those things get done first. So I don't have the 20 hours a week to dedicate to this. So I would covet information like that we can find, and I continue to review it as I can. But I agree with you that time is very, very short. I don't want to hold anybody up. I want to move forward as quickly as we possibly can through the user group committee, but I don't want to do something that is going to end up being more work. Not necessarily for us, we can do the work, but it's for the applicants and for the end users. So absolutely, however we need to get that done, more than happy to. I'm sure the user group committee as a whole would be extremely pleased with something like that.
Okay, with your permission, I'll work with the SWIC, and we'll get some absolute gotta-have forms, policies, and protocols in place to keep moving, and then we'll just gradually work into this, and our secretary of staff, we can literally take the document and insert what we need into there. That's okay.
Wonderful, thank you.
Okay. Does anybody else have any comments on that? Is that a best way to do this, or should we try to recreate things that have already been in place for quite some time? There are hundreds and hundreds of hours, and if you look at just the state of Minnesota's, for example, if you look at their policies, protocols for the Armor system well into 15 years, it's extensive. They've done the work, so.
I think every agency here does the same thing, like policy and protocols and general orders, and there's nothing wrong with that, so.
Okay.
You entertain some of us that have already done it? Running by these already.
So I guess my question is, already done what?
We adopted the Wisconsin ones.
And that's my point. Wherever we can get something, you at. Yep. Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
There are a number of systems, and of course Raycom is one I'm most familiar with, but I know I was talking with somebody who has a beeper people system also, and maybe you just brought up a good point. We need to talk to those current existing systems so we don't end up reinventing the wheel for those, because that's going to be very costly for many of us. So if we've got a substantial amount of current agencies in Iowa who have adopted a system of some sort, I would go there first before I would worry about out of state, because you're absolutely right. I know we did the exact same thing. I think about it, so.
My point was this, a
You're-
statewide system's different than a pocket. There's a lot of different
Totally
things
agree
to-
with that.
to-
What I'm
to
saying
go
is maybe that's gonna allow 20 of us to just tweak rather than completely rebuild. That's my point.
Anything we can take, I'm sure Andy will be open to anything we can use.
Especially the,
That's been the point all along, is to make sure that those users like Tim in Iowa that already have a system, that it's not a monstrous reprogramming effort or anything like that. So working with Westcom, working with Woodbury County, and that's what's nice about having Glenn as the RIC 3 chair now. He's going to be able to bring that to the table as well, and I encourage our UGC meetings. If you go to the ISICSB website under calendar, we meet on Thursday mornings to do a conference call, and anyone's always welcome to join, listen, and contribute. So I encourage anyone to do that.
especially forms. We don't need to create forms.
Right. Okay, Finance Committee, do I have either one of the chairs on the phone? Chair Grosskirth, do you happen to be on the phone? Vice Chair Nikki Whitaker, are you on the phone? Okay. Move on to the Governance Committee. Swick Allen, did you jump back on the phone?
Yes.
Would you give could
Still
you?
got a little bit of an echo, but I think I'll be able to wade through it.
Okay, go ahead.
So the governance committee met, and we both our members and the phone call. The first thing we did was review the UTC application document and explain that to the membership. The general agreement that it's covered to move forward. Chair Buffington was on the call, saying some of the things that he had experienced with it and some of his insights. Very helpful for the group. I would like to go back to something Chair Buffington had said, that my phone was on the form, and so I have received calls from several applicants trying to get funding from the Homeland Security Emergency Management E911 component. And we've received everything from just, hey, I want to put a radio on the system and interface the system, and have my dispatch center be able to talk to the other dispatch center, all the way up to we think we want to be a level 3 user. Probably not adding any towers, but adding sets and maybe some additional in-building coverage stuff, the PDAs or something like that, solve a problem for law enforcement. So it's been all over the board and exciting with conversations. I had 2 of them yesterday. So with that being said, the next thing the committee moved into was review of policy 2015-01. And for the board members will remember that the previous chair Uni had brought to their attention last meeting in July that the issues about weighted methodology requirements of the committee come up with recommendations for the chair that DC would use in formulating their design of the board itself. One of the things that came out of that, how long should members be on? And it was agreed to by the governance committee that a 3-year term would be the appropriate time. How we get there in the beginning might be a little choppy, but bear with me for just a minute. So the membership should be made up of 4 users, and out of those levels 3 and 4 users, their term then would be 3 years. They would be staggered such that there would only be a 1/3 loss or potential loss of voting members in any given term. And so that means to get started, some members might have a 1-year term appointment, others would have a 2-year term appointment, and a 3-year term appointment. And the other part we talked about is we wanted to make sure that those were 1, 2, and 3-year terms were distributed across the region so that we didn't have any particular region losing all of its membership at one time. The last element that we looked at was reappointment. How long should or could someone perhaps serve in this voting position? Because we believe as we move down Lias Road, these will be sought after positions so they can influence the op and interoperability of all of the users on the system. So that's fine. It's proven about that 2 consecutive terms as we start out probably adequate. And if someone wants to serve longer, I think it certainly apply, but would look more carefully at those other applicants that did not yet had an opportunity. So as I said, a little bit out there yet on this appointment. We have to get the first 3 years before we work anything out. But overall, I felt like a very productive meeting. We'll get something written up and provided to the board for actual for the next meeting. And I think the progress on government policy 2601. I'm still getting terrible feedback. That's about as far as I'm comfortable going right now. But I say that feedback out. But you guys are very clear. Just when I talk, a lot of feedback.
Yeah, we've had about all we can take of the breaking up too. So thank you, Craig. Chair Comanches, you're up.
I'm going to defer to Vice Chair on this because I think she was in on the calls. Is that correct? Or has there been any calls?
Oh, yeah, we've done the calls and we've all gone, anybody know what we're doing? No, okay. And that we need to know what we're supposed to be doing. So I did send an email to, I don't know.
Okay. So Ted, will you update us on your status? We'll go from there.
As I indicated 2 meetings ago, I guess, we didn't have one last month. I had originally planned on this being my last meeting, and at that particular time, I urged the chair to pick somebody who would be the new chairman of the Operations Committee. I talked to our president of the Iowa State Sheriff's Deputy Association several times. They've been talking to some people, working on some people, and I've been asked to stick around for a little bit longer here. I told them January 2nd is when I'm done as sheriff, so we're going to be working, and I'll work with them to make sure we get some replacement going here. There's been 3 names that have been vetted. They want to make sure that the incoming president, Sheriff Popravic from Johnson County, has some input in it too, and he's been gone. So they're working on it, but I thought I was going to be gone by today, but I'm still here. To the demand or lack thereof of many of you, I'm sure, but I'm here yet for a while, sir. But I would definitely urge you to begin taking the Operations Committee and migrating it over, and we'll sit down, we'll talk about it a little bit more, maybe off record, and see what we can do with it.
Let's say, could you assist her to get her on her way? Because I know you're working on things. Because you report that you're working on public-private partnership initiative. You're working on the SDR trailer operations.
We started both of those, and then we lost our lead on the trailer operations. I've been waiting to hear from the Department of Public Safety to see who the replacement for that's going to be.
Okay.
So that'll make a big difference on those trailers. That's been on a freeze since that happened.
Okay.
So once we get that, we can move forward with that particular thing. Public-private partnerships. We'll sit down. I know we began working on it, and that came to an end too. So we'll go to work. We'll talk a little bit later on, Ellen, about it. So.
Okay. Thank you. Chair Benson, Outreach.
Good morning. Brief report this morning for the members of the board. I need a little help from Craig Allen, the folks at Motorola with regard to finishing up the FAQ based on the questions and feedback that we got from the various policy and technology or technical-based webinars that we conducted. Like to get that finished up here as soon as possible, get that formatted, get that out to the wider audience, not only on the website, but also email it out to all of the folks that either participated or were originally notified. And then the committee would still like to see the monthly updates in terms of how the deployment of the network is going, so that you could do a webinar once a month on that, kind of a steady feed in terms of what's happening with progress, and then also taking developing some, I'm going to use a Q&A on the back end of it based on things that maybe Andy is seeing through his group, things that other people are seeing or hearing, kind of those questions that are kind of bubbling up as things are getting deployed, developed as the outreach continues. So I need to work with Craig and the chair on that, and also with Melvin on that to make sure his staff. But that's kind of the quick report of where we're at this month.
And I believe the meetings we had, the webinars are still on our YouTube.
Yep, they're still on if you go to the board's website and you go to the ISICS page, you'll find all of those. You'll find both the policy and the technical webinars are out there. We'll have the FAQ, once we get that polished up, will be out there as well.
Okay. Good enough, thank you. Sean, are you around? There you are. Outreach Specialist Sean Wagner.
Thank you, Chair. So far, we've been working quite frequently on the WISE project and updating what we're going to do with that. Last night was the environmental study with FirstNet being here, and it was a lot of stuff. They had a lot of stuff setting out at their booth, and I collected a bunch as well as something for the chair. Besides that, we've been working on the website. We're on website 3.0, just so you all know that since I started, this is our third version of our website. So this website has been a lot of work, and there's going to be something further on new business. But besides that, our FirstNet, we've been working on a new presentations for new outreach. We want to do some metro outreach coming up with hopefully involving the RICS and doing a metro outreach across the state. So that's kind of my quick summary of what I've been working on.
Okay.
Any questions?
Questions for Sean?
All right, thank you.
Okay. We did renew the Connect Iowa contract, which was under the Finance Committee. I just noticed also, so that's why Sean is still here. So that is another year. So had to, at the last minute, try to get that all into place, but we did manage to do that. So we'll move on to the Training and Exercise Committee. Chair Pavlik, are you on the phone?
I am.
Okay.
So I've only been the chair for one meeting, well, technically two, but one attendance meeting. We have just kind of got another discussing what training needs to be looked at, come up with some training ideas. And then we were talking about training ideas we could send to potentially obtain grant funding for. The biggest thing that we are planning right now is need to make an announcement. We're going to have an instant communication center manager training. That's actually going to take place in Davenport. It's going to be posted, well, hopefully later today, but they can register. You can only have 20 people in the class. It will be September 26th through 28th, a 3-day class. And the whole purpose is to have some communication center managers trained in the trailers to come out. I think it's a great opportunity for training. Kind of just came up. We were able to get it scheduled very quickly. So pretty sure we're going to have a good turnout. It usually ends up being very good, but that's where we're at right now with training.
Denise, do you need the use of our website to post anything?
Yes, we will actually. Once I get the official, I send it on to Craig just to make sure that he has it. We'll have to post it, and they'll have to be able to register. They'll have to have a link to register, so that will have to get posted on the website. I do have a copy of it.
Okay. All right. Any questions for Denise? Thanks for taking that duty of the chair. Appreciate it.
No problem.
Okay, we'll move on to technology. Mr. Updike, are you on the phone?
Yes, I am.
Go ahead, you got the floor.
This is kind of an amalgamation of 2 months of conference calls with the technology committee, but we're still working with the P25 fleet mapping issue and Andy Buffington. There'll be more conversations there. One of the other issues that we discussed in the 2 months was the NIFOG, IFOG interoperability channels. In the July call, we looked at the web page that Rob Dennard has with all of his documentation sitting out there. We did go ahead and move forward with putting that link on the ISICS web page so that people can reference those documents. Obviously, these documents cover a lot of different mutual aid and interoperability channels from 30 years ago and up to today. So in that discussion of the interoperability channels, it was brought to our attention by one of the board members that he had had an issue with a situation where a missing persons incident took place, and with all of the incoming assistance, not everybody had the interoperability channels programmed into their radios. And so the discussion started on what could be done to correct that problem. And so it was brought to everyone's attention that we already have a policy out there that says it's the policy ISICSB 12-B as of January 1st, 2014, that lays out the interoperability channels that you should have in your radios in the VHF, UHF, 700, 800 bands. And so this person's concern was, how do you make people put that into their radios? Well, we really don't have an enforcement capability to do that, but part of this concern was based on the wording of this document too, that says that you should instead of shall put these frequencies into your radios. And so the conversation went forward with looking into the possibility of taking this document, this policy ISICSB 12-B, pushing it back to the governance committee and have them review this and consider a change of wording from should to shall. And one of the other things that we would like to do in the process of pushing that over to governance for consideration is to add wording in this policy that would state that these minimum interoperability channels should follow the NIFOG handbook when it comes to CTCSS and NAC codes, because currently that document, that policy doesn't lay any of that out. The general user looks at this policy and says, okay, I can see VCall 10, VTAC 11, 12, all these channels, but it doesn't lay out any guidelines for CTCSS tones and NAC codes. So we're in the process of getting that over to the governance committee for their consideration, or at least look into that. One of the other topics that came up was, how is an agency going to be able to pay for getting these channels programmed in? And so I did a little outreach with some people outside of the technology group with one of our other members, and we were able to get some ideas as to how an agency could possibly seek some sort of funding or grants to help pay for that. Reading my notes here, so be patient with me. in the end, the action items for these two meetings was to, one, suggest that the ISICS policy for minimum interoperability radio channels and nomenclature have the word shall replace the word should. Suggest that the conventional interop channels be required to be programmed into radios that also access the ISICS platform, which we're currently discussing that with UGC Chair Andy Buffington. Doing that would ensure that any of the radios that get on the ISICS platform would have these conventional channels programmed into the various zones of that radio. And as another part of the discussions, there was talk of removal of a list of COMLs and COMTs currently on the ISICS web page, and investigation of the development of a list of credentialed COMLs and COMTs that could be published online or on CHASM. And I have to kind of thank Rob Coppert here for taking over the August call, because I was not able to attend that. So if you have any questions, let me know. I'll be more than happy to answer that. Thanks.
Patrick, a couple things. I remember this policy as one of our very first policies. We passed it in Mason City, I believe. And that was before we adopted the year and then the number policy, because we used MC because we were in Mason City at the time. Given that, we talked about the word shall and should, and we put it back to, it was shall, but we discussed we don't have any authority in case when they don't. So I would caution you to, if you change that word, it's not going to change anything, because the board still has no authority to force people to put that in there. But we did talk about at the time when we had the ISICSB grants that we were running off of, that we needed to get spent down before we could had to revert it back to the feds. We had a plan that we were going to use that funding to help people program that money in, but that never developed because the funding went away before we could get it done. So for the new board members, that's the history. So to move forward with that, I would suggest getting with, you can change it, but if you do, you're not going to change the way we can handle that. And wording gets tricky sometimes, but also our attorney general would have to probably get involved in that to maybe revisit, and I'm sure you're going to get the same answer, but that's my opinion on it, and I'll open up to any more comment. Ted,
Mr. Chair, we had a lot of discussion on this, and since there was no leverage that we had in order to, I guess, penalize, for lack of better terminology at this point, the only other thing we talked about was the possibility of adding verbiage that basically the agency who fails to utilize or add those channels to their system, that they solely are responsible for any civil litigation that would arise based on the outcome of events where the lack of said channels failed or caused a failure of interoperability between agencies responding. Something to that effect. I remember we had discussion about that, and at that point, I think the attorneys kind of said, whoa, wait a minute here a little bit. But really, that's what it comes right down to. If you have cars that have bald tires, or you have cars that are inadequate, or you have inadequate training, you, the agency yourselves, are the ones who incur the responsibility and liability of said action. Our only concern was at the time was we don't want to draw ISICS down that tube either. We don't want to get sucked into that if something does occur from it. So if you're going to take it back, if you're going to look it over, make sure that we address at the very least that type of an issue.
Sure. Anybody else?
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
can you hear me now? It's finally cleared up on this end.
Yes, we can.
Great. One of the things that we perhaps should think about here is this policy's been out since it's quite a while, 2014. Maybe with that length of time under its belt, we could work with Homeland Security and other granting entities and say that part of the requirements of a future grant, if it touches on voice in any way or ties into a dispatch center in any way, that they would have to that applicant would have to show that their radios had been appropriately programmed that's been one of the issues that have come up, that we have found that the equipment has the frequency in it, or the interoperability channel, if you will, it is improperly labeled. And just something as simple as getting those programmed and aligned helps that user on the street in the middle of the night make the right choice because it's appropriately aligned. As we look at the range of possibilities to help folks understand the importance of this, that might be one that would be attractive, is that their grant application would require that they validate that their radios are appropriately programmed with the interoperability frequencies as consistent with ISICS policy. That's all I have to say.
And bleeding off of that a little, kind of directs to Andy's committee. If you want to join ISICS with your radio is approved. I believe we've talked and learned the best practice from another state. You will have these channels in your radio in order to join ISICS at a minimum in this talk group. You will have this talk group just to solve that problem. So if you do come on, you're not getting on unless you have these radio channels in your frequency, in your radios, which I think is good.
At user group, we specifically talked about that. You know, we don't have that carrot to say, even if we say shall, we have no power to put behind it. But at the same time, whether we're working with Homeland, working with, we've already discussed the idea that there's going to be interoperable talk groups at specific locations with these channels in them as a requirement for ISICS access. Why can't we do the same thing throughout the entire process? You're going to get some of those applicants that only wish to have that level 1 access and are going to maintain some of those other interoperability functions and features, and we need to be able to mandate down that direction. So I don't think monetarily there's a whole lot we can do unless, you know, it goes through Homeland, but for the most part, what we can do is procedurally make sure that throughout their programming that they have the interoperability channels where they need to have them.
And back then, we didn't have a system. We were trying to at least improve what interoperability we do have and what this board could do to help with the interoperability. And that was one of the driving forces behind that policy. But now that we have a system, this all kind of starts to fall nicely here. So, okay. Oh boy. Rob, would you like to speak?
I would.
Okay.
Thank you. I just want to bring up, we had an incident yesterday. There was a school bus rollover down in southern Iowa that we transported the Blank Children's Hospital PEDS transport team down, and we're attempting to communicate with the ambulance one of the ambulances that was bringing a patient up to Blank, and couldn't find, our crew found VLAW 31. The crew coming up from, I believe it was Decatur County, couldn't find VLAW 31 in their radio. This is happening today. It happened yesterday. It's going to happen tomorrow until we fix this. You said that the board does not have authority. So I go back to the State of Iowa Telecommunications Plan from November 30th of 1994 that was prepared and approved by LEATAC. Do we need to go back to LEATAC and have them adjust this policy? Because that's where this is coming from. This policy this communications plan that 155.475 is on has never been updated. So is it going to be LEATAC that's going to have to update it, or is this board going to do it?
Well, my question to that is LEATAC in existence?
Absolutely.
Who is on that board?
Absolutely.
Who is on that board?
I don't know. I've been told that this board replaced LEATAC. But now you say today, this board doesn't have the authority. So is LEATAC existing? Does this plan exist?
But LEATAC was formed, if I'm correct on this, LEATAC was formed to be an advisory piece to the Commissioner of Public Safety.
Yes, and that still exists in the administrative rules.
What do they have?
So there's still no authority, whether you say LEATAC or ISICSB, where the Commissioner can say that if you don't do this, this is going to happen. You're still back to what if they don't do it?
So
I guess my question is, what is LEATAC going to solve that we can't, or the?
I think it's back to this original plan that's never been updated. And
Yeah, I
that's what
get the
people
plan.
operate on.
I understand we need to update that. I get that, but I thought you were going to go with LEATAC has the authority, so let's go back to them and
And maybe they do, but does Leotac even exist?
That was my question.
Well, but people that are applying for, in fact, I had to go through this plan just a couple years ago, and frequency coordinators and less fish with DPS, I mean, they were referring us back to this plan that still exists that.
But isn't that just guidance? There's no authority in the sense of penalization. I mean, they're not going to take the firstborn of somebody or something, for God's sakes, and that's the problem. No, I understand the importance of it, but you're absolutely right. I mean, it took us forever to get them to quit calling it mutual aid, you know, for instance, and VLAW. I remember when we were talking about VLAW in the beginning, people were going out and have VLAW. Well, you have mutual aid, you know, on the radio. So there's a definite problem that exists here. But at the same time, I don't care who it is. I don't care if it's Commissioner of Public Safety. What authority does Commissioner of Public Safety have to put any penalty over anybody who says, no, I'm not going to do that, or who just fails to do it? That's the problem you have. We have basically the same type of authority, granted, by legislature. So the bottom line on it is we have to come up with some means of at least shifting liability to those people so that they suffer themselves if there's something that occurs, or controlling purse strings. And we don't have any purse strings to control. Neither does Leotac.
So am I hearing the problem's not going to get fixed? This board doesn't have the authority and it just continues to, we can't talk.
This is not dissimilar to the issue that we had with point to point, the interference that was rambling about the state. And I mean, up in north central Iowa, we sent out information from the board, and it wasn't much longer after that I had vendors at my shop making sure that everything was corrected. So I agree that we have no authority to mandate down to those individual agencies that you shall do this. However, there's identified problem. There's identified public safety risks that we need to address. Whether we say shall or should, let's push this out and say, this is the problem, this is how we believe that we need to solve it, and just do what we absolutely can. Can we force somebody to do it? I don't believe we can. Should we make it a very strong recommendation, use whatever tools that we have at our disposal to make sure that those agencies that might come under an application process or a grant process do follow along with these mandates or these recommendations, but we need to address it at some point, because it is a real public safety problem in Rob's example, in the Bremer County example as well.
And that's what I said about the civil litigation. That's the only pride point we have. At least if you're going to say shall, you're going to have to go ahead and tie something to it that says, listen, don't be a fool, do this. Because if you don't, the recommendation from us, the professionals, supposedly by legislative authority, if you will, that's what we have, we've said you should do this, or you shall do this. And if you don't do it, then you're going to incur whatever happens from that. You know, for gosh sakes, I mean, we can sit here for an hour and talk about what agencies throughout the state don't do that should be doing. You know, whether it's training or putting their brother Bubba in a spot on the line. I mean, that's the reality of it. As long as we put out a product that says do this, you know,
that's probably going to be the reference document that if something does happen, they're going to point to. Well, the board
Absolutely.
has said you should do this. Why didn't you? So and then it would
Mr. Chair.
take it from there. Go ahead.
This is Rick. I recommend that we take this conversation, break it down to a letter, send it to the Director of Homeland Security and to the Program Manager for 911, asking or recommending that any further grants that would touch the dispatch center follow along and be required to align with the policies that have been outlined by the board or will be outlined by the board. It's a simple checkbox to say that they're compliant with the policies, and if they have a question, they can certainly give the SWIC or go through the UGC to see if they are compliant with either the ISICSB or with the VHF. I don't believe anyone's using anything other than those two bands that are creating tension, and I think we get to what Rob's looking for, which is not really we can take something and harm them, but I really think that the issue is in many cases I don't think they understand what their obligations are. and they're good people trying to work really hard and doing things they need to do on a daily basis, but just don't really understand sometimes that there's some things that they should be doing that aren't getting done, and this might help with that.
If you,
It will just advance the conversation.
Craig, if you attach this to the 911 surcharge fund money, you can bet your sweet butt it'll be taken care of in a month.
Well, that's kind of what I was thinking, Sheriff, is that if there was a way to do that without people feeling like somehow this is being punitive, this is aligning for the future with something that's been in place for a couple of years, is what my thoughts were. And again, I when it comes up, it's not that I haven't run into anyone that's blatantly saying, heck no way we're going to do this. It's more I didn't understand, and my radio vendor didn't tell me I had to have this done. What do you mean these changes need to occur? So it's an understanding piece. And I think this might help drive that conversation. If they got to check a box, they're going to sign. I'm done.
Okay,
If you want me to write the letter, I'll be happy to draft them.
I was just going to ask, since you brought the topic up, are you willing to, you're on the governance committee right now, helping out with that, to draft some type of letter that your committee can discuss, vet it out, and bring it to the board meeting next month?
Yes, sir. We will do that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Can you wait just a sec? I want to get through my meeting here. Okay. Okay, go ahead.
You're talking about the mutual aid, old mutual aid, fire med, and all that. I had the same issue. By financials. But who's your frequency coordinator? The FCC says you can state what has to be.
Mr. Chair, I can't hear him.
So it states that what you do, you can state as the frequency coordinator who can be on your network.
By what frequencies, and that's how I did it in my county. And that was from the FCC. So they can't be on my network unless they have these channels in it.
But I think any CEO of any agency can do that. That's the problem.
So you can here too is with your statewide radio. If you want to get on it, you got to
for the statewide you can.
Correct.
Absolutely, yeah.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
there's also the Department of Public Health has a large grant program. I recently approved the purchase of some radios for Decatur County. And so don't forget when you're drafting the letter that there are other grant programs out there. I happen to be the EMS frequency chair for the state. So maybe it's something that I could assist with as well. I'm not sure if there's any leverage from that way, but approving those funds for the purchase of radios is definitely something that we can say, yes, you can do the radios, but you have to have them programmed with whatever IFOGs or whatever frequencies you want. So thank you.
Okay, you bet.
With whatever grant funds may be available in the future, I don't necessarily see any problem with that. 2 years ago, we took the P25 language and added that into the grant application. So we can certainly look at something like that. I think rather than listing every single requirement that changes periodically, just referring back to whatever policies that the ISICSB board might have. And John Benson is cutting me off. Okay.
Go ahead, John.
I might suggest that, as was adequately pointed out, we are not the sole lending agency in this state, and I would instruct the board to keep in mind that any time an agency makes an application for a federal grant, such as assistance to firefighters, anything else, if it's communications related, it has to check back to the SCIP. Not policies, not any of that stuff. It checks back to the SCIP. Is it meeting the SCIP? Does our SCIP have this language in it? I'm going to go with no. So the document you should be referencing back to is going to be the SCIP. And that would be the simplest way to do it because the SCIP will be a living document. It will change. Don't go back to a policy. Put it in the SCIP. Make it part of the larger process.
Good point. Craig, did you hear that?
Yeah, I have heard that, and that's been part of our dilemma in getting this thing finalized is that some of these things have come up in other conversations with the federal groups, and that's why the alignment of the SCIP is taking a different tack than it looked the last time. We need to get it down to 3 goals, and we need to then align around those 3 goals, and what we've talked about today fits perfectly with an LMR leg. So yes, it does make perfect sense, although I still think it would be helpful to have these letters filed, and we'll go ahead and work a dual track, one working a SCIP, the other one working a notification and a request to grantors, at least direct them back to our policies.
And I'm sure Blake will work with you on that. Okay.
And that also includes. Yeah, and I'll get with Randy
Sure.
too.
Okay. All right, let's move on. The National Public Safety Broadband Committee Chair, he is here. John Tell, you want to start it off? And then I've asked John Tell and Rick, of course, they're both here. FirstNet's taken some pretty good shape here in the last 6 months, and they've had several committee meetings, so I'd like to have them update the board on the FirstNet, since we do have some new board members, and for our other board members on the progress of FirstNet in Iowa.
Sure. So FirstNet is still in the evaluation phase right now, selecting the prime vendor for the construction of the network, but the FirstNet Broadband Committee has still been working diligently on several projects. The Iowa FirstNet Public-Private Partnerships Summit was Thursday, August 25th at the Grimes State Office Building. We hold the summit twice a year, typically in March and August, just to provide a space for public and private industries to come together and just get an update on the FirstNet process. We had 6 panelists at the summit. Tom Lampe was one, Rick Lombard another, Bob Van Wolfrat, Ryan Boone from Premier Communications, Dave Duncan from ICA, and also Ray Warner from Arion, which is formerly Iowa Network Services. We had 52 attendees in person, attendees in total, 29 in person, and 23 people attended by webinar. We distributed a survey directly following the summit, and we received pretty good feedback. Several participants requested that we continue on with the summit, so the committee did vote earlier this week to continue holding the summit twice a year. We might look at doing the summits in April and September instead of March and August going forward, so that we allow time for the vendor to be selected and also for state plans to be released. Tribal outreach. The FirstNet Broadband Committee continues to engage in tribal outreach. We are working with the Meskwaki tribe to identify quarterly update meetings with them, and we have also provided them with a survey to complete for user and coverage profile data collection. Right now, FirstNet has a deadline of September 30th, so we're working to submit the data by then. August 16th, Iowa was the host of the Quality of Service Priority and Preemption Consultation Task Team meeting. Iowa hosted that meeting for FEMA Region 7, which consists of Iowa, Nebraska, Kansas, and Missouri. The FirstNet Broadband Committee had 5 representatives attend that meeting to provide insight on behalf of Iowa. And that was just one of the many expected meetings planned by FirstNet. We have the SPOC meeting coming up in November, which, Tom, I think you're attending. And we're also expecting to schedule the executive consultations for the region and also the metro engagements that Sean Wagner talked about earlier. FirstNet has also released the draft programmatic environmental impact statement for each state. It includes environmental analysis and also considerations. So the statement for the central region, including Iowa, was released on August 12th. FirstNet is inviting the public to comment during a 60-day public comment period, which ends October 11th. And during this time, FirstNet is traveling to each state and holding public meetings for the public to attend and any interested stakeholders to come learn about the project and ask any questions that they may have. The public meeting for Iowa was last night at the Hyatt Hotel, and the programmatic statement for Iowa is about 450 pages long, and it can be downloaded on the regulations.gov website. And that concludes the committee report, if you have any questions. I'll turn it over to Rick.
All right.
Good morning.
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 Make certain this is all working here. And we should have a slideshow somewhere. Do you guys see the slideshow?
I see you doing this.
There we go.
There we go. All right. So this is going to be an overall update, and what I would do is I just go over it. If you have questions, please stop me, throw something at me, whatever you need. We can stop and discuss real issues, but otherwise I'm going to try to go right on through it, and I'll let you guys decide if we take any rabbit holes. First of all, it's important to understand the history and the mandate of FirstNet in general. In 2004, the 911 Commission report recommended that Congress should support pending legislation which provides for the expedited and increased assignment of radio spectrum for public safety purposes. The crux of this whole issue is that interoperability was not able to happen, and we couldn't cross-communicate, and those who tried to use the commercial cellular services were overloaded with the public in general utilizing that spectrum, so it wasn't available. So in this process, it continued on, and there was a legislation called the Middle Class Tax Relief Job Creation Act of 2012, and in that act was the language that says the First Responder Network Authority shall hold the single public safety wireless license and take all necessary actions to ensure that building, deployment, and operation of the nationwide public safety broadband network. So all that language says is that FirstNet was created by law to do one thing by law, and that was to set up a nationwide broadband cellular network that was for primary use of public safety. The impetus behind this came from public safety. It wasn't a Washington legislative-driven effort. This was the demand that came up from public safety saying there must be a way that we can operate in public safety at a level different than the commercial space in the cellular arena, and so that there wouldn't be contention with that. So this network, and I'll use some of your prior conversations here today, shall happen. It just depends on what it's going to look like and what it's going to do. And so although there's this interaction with states and states saying, well, I think this, and it will happen. By law, they are tasked to do this, and it will happen in different iterations. Some states have been very collaborative with FirstNet. Some of them have not been. And so, but either way, FirstNet will win at the end of the day and put in a cellular infrastructure. But how well there's buy-in, how well it actually is adopted, and all those issues will really depend on what happens at the state level, which is where we have these constant conversations. So for the last 3 years, the FirstNet Broadband Committee has been that liaison position between FirstNet at a federal level and the state public safety community, state government, and things like this to make certain that that conversation is managed at a high level. Let's go ahead and continue on. So the board of directors of FirstNet was public safety officials and members of the private sector, and they were charged with creating a national public safety broadband network dedicated to public safety users. But here's a little crux to this issue. The FCC has a broadband spectrum that they have that can be used. However, there's a block just for public safety called Band 14. And they offered other spectrum for sale and things like this. And out of this, they created some money by the sale of spectrum. And they've dedicated roughly, call it $8 billion for the development of this national network, which is a good start. And so it is a good start, but it is not the magic checkbook for everything, all things for 50 states and 5 territories to deploy this network. So they have provision in there to where the private sector or the prime vendor, whoever deploys this network for FirstNet, could also utilize some of that cellular spectrum to provide commercialized cell service to the general public. However, should any tie go to the bandwidth, everything shifts into public safety, and then it even begins to prioritize and rate and rank inside the public safety arena. And so they're allowing for the use of some excess spectrum just to help monetize FirstNet nationwide. So some states may be an easy build, some states may be a hard build, and depending on how each state happens. I will tell you, those near the front of the pack will have access to more funds than those at the back of the pack. And so deployment schedules and things like this. And I will tell you right now, Iowa is near the front edge of that entire conversation. It is not an insurance policy that we will opt in and be right at the front edge of this. If the plan is good for Iowa and this committee approves that plan, and the governor approves that plan, then it could happen very quickly following that point in time. But if it's not a good plan for Iowa, there could be a very slow process to go through to come up with something that is amicable to what we need in Iowa. So just kind of a high level. Any questions so far? All right, so let's go ahead and go on. I'm going to define what this looks like, and here's, I'll try not to go all the way through all the language, but I want you to hear three things. There is the Band 14 core, which is the core of the cellular network, and that is owned and managed and will always be managed by FirstNet. It is managed by the federal entity called FirstNet. They're not letting private sector have access to the core. And why is that important to us? Is that FirstNet has also approached the state of Iowa, and the state of Iowa has carried on conversations with FirstNet about the core of that FirstNet network being housed perhaps at JFHQ in a hardened communication facility, something like that, where they have ready access to the 911 circuits, ready access to the LMR circuits, and things like that for interoperability purposes. So Band 14 core will always be FirstNet's responsibility, but this whole RFP process that's out there to find who's going to be the prime and all of that process is about what's called the RAN, and the RAN is the radio network. For those of us who drive around on the highways, we see cellular towers and we see radio towers. Radio towers are the tall towers, hundreds of feet tall, but if you see these smaller structures with like a ring of antennas around the top, those are cellular antennas, and this is going to be a cellular network. So there could be US Cellular on a tower, could be Verizon on a tower, Sprint on a tower, and a series of radios around the tower that are Band 14 towers, or Band 14 radios. And so that's what those look like. You may see a tower that has one carrier on it, or a tower that has many carriers on it, but that's the infrastructure that's called the RAN. It includes the tower, the radio equipment at the top, the equipment down in the hut, down at the bottom, and then the connection fiber that goes from every tower to connect to the core or wherever that is, so that all the towers can interconnect across the state. And we don't know what that's going to look like yet, because that's part of the RFP. That whoever these vendors are that are responding to this RFP are designing a plan for Iowa. They're saying, here's what, we've taken all your data, Iowa, all the data that your broadband committee has submitted to you. We will develop a state plan and an architecture that will lay over the state of Iowa to provide this network. And so, committee, it's important to understand this isn't FirstNet giving us the plan. FirstNet manages the core, and we may interoperate with them at that level, but the prime vendor who's awarded for the nation will develop each state plan for that middle section, just the radio network. Then down below that, you have all the applications and the devices. You have handheld devices, your arbitrator things for the cars, radios in the cars, mobile, cows, sows, all those different apparatus that connect to this cellular network. Is at the device level. And that's really a conversation we're not involved in, because that's manufacturers. That's the manufacturer will have a phone with a SIM card for Verizon and a SIM card for FirstNet. That's specifically Band 14, a dual SIM phone or a dual SIM iPad or something like that that allows it to run in that type of a function. Any questions so far about that? All right, so the current state of our operating, we have mobile devices in cars, we have smart devices that public safety uses in the commercial sector, and we have LMR radios. And now it's important to understand there is not a connection, and I would ask that this committee not try to tie in the two conversations at this time for some time to come. Don't bridge the conversations between land mobile radio and FirstNet. FirstNet is cellular, it's not Wi-Fi, it is cellular communication, and LMR takes all the different flavors that we have in the state and how we provide that. So this is the cellular device, instead of being on a commercial network, would be on the private FirstNet network. And we're not having push-to-talk conversations right now in the near field. They're talking 60 months down the road as push-to-talk technology kind of grows up a little bit, that it would be able to then merge into that process. But for right now, we're keeping those conversations starkly different at this time. So this next one, I'm going to go ahead and skip and go to the last one. So the goal would be that there would be a FirstNet device in the car, there would be a FirstNet device on their hip, And land mobile radio would still handle itself however it handles itself. So the process is really just to take either the terrestrial or the mobile cellular apparatus in the cars right now that are in the commercial broadband space and convert that to FirstNet, and then let LMR continue to do whatever LMR is going to do. By this here. So why does there need to be a FirstNet? And this is something that our education team and outreach team with Sean Wagner and others have gone out all across the state having these conversations. Public safety uses wireless technology. They need efficient, effective means of handling situations. Bandwidth demands are a big deal. The state troopers are using Traumahawk, which is an application that allows them to push pictures of accident scenes or data from accident scenes to hospitals. That takes a lot of bandwidth. And if you have a lot of YouTube users on that cell sector, is not a good time to find out you don't have bandwidth. So this allows for dedicated bandwidth for each cell sector. Now, if I could just give you a little bit of an example, if you were to take a cell tower and spin it on its edge like this, there's 3 cell sectors that come off every cell tower, 3 sectors. And so whatever devices are on one sector can have full access to that sector and probably figure out that you can put about 600 devices in a sector and probably not run out of gas on this thing. And in Iowa, when we did our data study, we figured out how many potential devices there could be in the state of Iowa at any given time on this network. So let's just use a number called 40,000 statewide. That's total everybody. That's even using LMR radios in plow trucks. I mean, that's anybody who could potentially be a public safety responder could do this. The probability of us having an oversubscription position in this state, we really don't see that in the math. So I would say that if they provide a coverage for the state of Iowa that is ubiquitous, meaning corner to corner, and we don't leave anything open, and that we would have the bandwidth to provide unblocked cellular access to public safety across the state of Iowa. That is our request of FirstNet, and that so far that has been their all right agreement. So we'll wait and see what the state plan looks like. Okay. We wanted to be able to have a public safety grade network. Right now, the commercial sector is not public safety grade. Public safety grade is very specific. It has some hardening. You're in public safety, I mean, it's okay if a commercial tower goes down and someone else has to roam and get other access, but in public safety situations, that's not acceptable. So they have to beef up their transport, have to beef up their electronics, beef up their redundancy on their power in and out of towers, things like that. So there is a big ask, and whatever vendor gets this, I believe, public grade conversations are the 800-pound gorilla in the room of everything FirstNet. It's not going to be providing cellular service. Anybody can provide cellular service, and we could do it all tomorrow again. But providing public safety grade cellular apparatus is a very strong discussion, and it is a big checkbook. Because whatever you do twice. Whatever you do harder. So whatever's good for commercial will have to stiffen in most applications to a stronger grade. Priority of service. So if you have a fireman getting a cat out of a tree in a sector, but there's an active shooter situation in that same sector, do you allocate the bandwidth differently? And so they're building intelligence into the cellular network that allows for high degrees of prioritization at a millisecond level. It'll be making thousands of decisions all the time at a millisecond level that does not require human interaction. And so they're asking us, how do you guys want that prioritization to happen? And that's the purpose for some of these workshops we've been holding, asking public safety and other people in our FEMA region, how do they want to prioritize that access? Should there be different levels of a hazmat spill versus a personal injury accident? And do you need to reallocate bandwidth accordingly? But we're not saying there's no one behind a screen making these changes. The intelligence is in the system build that's statically built with all these dynamics in there. At a millisecond level, it'll begin throwing those things around. Okay, this talks about who we have right now. We have our state point of contacts with FirstNet, with Chair Lampe is the state point of contact. And then and we have meetings nationwide with all the other SPOCs of the state talking about this conversation and listening to what's happening at FirstNet. There's conversations going on with all the governors. There's conversations going on with all the chief information officers, all the way through across the state, down to the IT level, and very heavy in the public safety. I think I can tell you, and even though I come deep into the telecommunication industry as the executive director of the ICN, I've been through a lot of federal programs. This is the first federal program that I can actually tell you I believe is collaborative. That they're asking more questions of us more than they're telling us what's going to happen. And we've been through all sorts of stuff with the Department of Commerce and NTIA and the FCC and all those conversations. This is by far the best collaborative conversation of any federal program or any federal initiative I've ever seen. And they're asking us a lot of questions, and they're taking those comments and building it into the structure. Okay? Any questions thus far? I'm going to pick this up just a little bit. I'm going to take us into what this looks like inside Iowa. We are using the RICs across the state of Iowa, the 6 FEMA regions, the FEMA areas in the state, and we're using these for points of outreach across the state currently. And all the RICs have a voice at the FirstNet Broadband Committee level. So let me just paint this for you. This committee is the Interoperability Board. There's a subcommittee called the Iowa FirstNet Broadband Committee that I chair with Bob Van Wolfrat, and we manage that technical layer of the conversation for the state, and we pass motions back up through you and things like this. But all the RICs have on-the-ground representation for the FirstNet conversation. They could have as much interface and much involvement as they want. And so this is our effort to ensure that we have as much communication information flowing out there as possible. As John Tell said, we have now issued our full second year of public-private partnership summits, where we've called statewide and asked people to come participate in this conversation. And I will tell you that FirstNet at a federal level is right now, this last month, released metro engagements, which they want to start having these summits that we've already been running now for 2 years. So state to state, county to county, I would tell you that we've done a very strong job communicating across the state about the FirstNet conversation. Are there people who don't know? Sure. Are there questions that need to be answered? I think we've shared everything we know. We don't keep any information in our pockets, and these summits have allowed for us to communicate with the private sector, law enforcement, and public safety responders of all shape and size. So any questions about that right now? I'm about to be ready to close here. So the RFP is the big thing right now, and they went through all this process. It's a huge RFP. So we heard that some of the RFP responses numbered in 25 plus 3-inch binders in their responses for this RFP, that they brought them in on carts of manuals. This RFP has to cover 50 states and five territories worth of telecommunication design and responses that cover all of these issues you see on your screen right now. They've added more. They felt that there were some cybersecurity concerns that needed to be addressed, that there was opt-out processes and things like this. So the RFP has been issued. The RFP has closed. The responses have come in, and the responses are being evaluated right now. And what will happen is this, and if you can take this away from this time, is this little bit of a roadmap. So right now, they are evaluating the responses. Maybe by the end of this calendar year, they will have an intent to award, that someone came to the top of the pack and they're ready to release that intent to award. Once that intent to award happens, whoever is the prime vendor has to then develop the state plans for each of the states. So that could take a few months. So we don't know that we don't believe we will see a state plan this calendar year. We might see a vendor this calendar year who comes out on top, but the state plan will not arrive. We would think at the earliest would be Q1 calendar of 17. And so at that point, that state plan will come through the SPOC to the FirstNet Broadband Committee, and the committee of us that meet every month will sit down and parse it and chew on it and look at it and see, does this protect and enforce the design that we feel is best for public safety in the state of Iowa? And if we say yes, we'll come back up and say, this is the state plan, and we'll respond to FirstNet and said, we believe we have a state plan that makes sense. If it doesn't, it causes a whole different set of actions. But after that draft state plan is issued, At some point after that, have not said how long, could be 30, 60, 90, we don't know. All the final state plans will be released across the nation in 5 territories all at the same time. One big dump comes down with all the plans to all the states, and that starts a 90-day clock. And a governor could accept it day one, and if the draft we feel is good, and as soon as that final comes down, we can have a recommendation to the governor's office, and every month when I meet with the governor, I update the governor and his staff on the processes with FirstNet. So he's aware of this. He's met with FirstNet executives. He's met with other governors on the FirstNet process. And so if we have a good state plan, then the governor would be free to go ahead and say, let's do this thing and begin, and deployment begins immediately. Now, that 90-day process happens, and say the governor chooses to withhold his vote on that process. After 90 days, the plan will happen anyway. So the only other choice to that is if the governor says, on the advice of our committee, on the advice of our interoperability board, we don't feel that this plan is the best for the public safety population of the state of Iowa, and then we would come back and begin a process called opt-out, where we would begin developing an entire interior design, partnerships, and all sorts of stuff to come up with a design that FirstNet would still have to approve. We'd still have to lease spectrum. We'd still have to use all the funds right back into the process of development of the network, and we would be building it ourselves. Those are the options. And so as for now, this broadband task force has recommended that unless something changes and this plan comes back not in keeping with the initial findings, that opt-in would be our leaning. We don't see a reason to do anything different than that now. The red button will be, if the plan comes down and is not conducive to the public safety population in Iowa, we would go down the other lane. And we'd be full willing to do that, and we have the ability to have that conversation in the state, but we don't think that that is the best option at this time if the state plan is healthy for the state. So with that, I'll entertain any questions. That gets us from the beginning all the way to where we're at right now. And once they start building, we have no idea how long that would take, but that is your FirstNet 101. Can I answer any questions for you all? All right, hearing none. Thank you, Chair.
Good job. Thank you. That is why it's important, and I'll just make this comment, to have these RICs and the chairs in place for that particular reason. The reason we formed the RICs was to deal with the FirstNet initiative and roll it into Land Mobile Radio also. So the sooner we get those RIC chairs filled and those committees populated, the more voice they have on RIC's committee, the more voice they have on the LMR and the FirstNet initiative. It's a huge, huge undertaking. And sometimes I think that people don't realize it. That could be my fault for not getting the message out, but it's a big deal. If you didn't understand what Rick just said, it's a big deal. So if you know people that want to get involved, let's get them on those RICs and keep moving on them. Excuse me?
And right around the corner.
Yes. So 2 big things going on. All right, where are we at here? Let's see. We are at information sharing under other reports. I'll just report that I did go to that environmental impact meeting that was 450 pages long, but I did not read that, but I don't plan on reading that. I took it for, Rick and I were both there in attendance along with John Tell and Schweta were there. So we spent the time, the FirstNet explained the impacts in Iowa. So we did that for about an hour and a half last night at the was it the Savory? I'm on to anybody else. Open up to the board members for information that you'd like to share amongst each other. All right, crickets. I'll move on. Is Jim Lundstedt? Do you happen to be on the phone today? Okay.
Chair, this is the Square. He said that he had some obligations that may prevent him from joining us today, but he was going to try and make it. So if you haven't heard from me, probably we'll move on.
No problem. We'll move on to the Motorola project manager, Melvin Mercado, the ISICS update.
Good morning. This will be a quick briefing. In looking at the overall system build-out, we have 27 sites that are currently locked in, so we're intending on getting a majority of those sites done before the end of this year. Those are scattered throughout the different regions. I won't go through those, but overall, by the end of the year, we intend to integrate the Woodbury dispatch, the STARCOM system, Dallas County's radio system and their dispatch, and all the DPS dispatch centers that are scattered throughout the state as well. One of the biggest milestones, of course, would be the fleet mapping, which will be meeting in the middle of October. A lot of things to discuss there because that's obviously important in terms of integration of the different subsystems throughout the state. As far as the Iowa State Fair, looking at the overall numbers for the particular event, all the feedback that we received was pretty good. We had a total of 22,538 calls during the event. And the three major categories of groups that we were looking at was the Iowa State Patrol with 8,600, a little bit over 8,600 calls for the duration of the state fair. The fair police itself had a little bit over 8,600, so it was almost equal between the two. And then we also had Des Moines PD on the system as well. They had roughly 5,200 calls for the duration of the state fair. So overall, these agencies were able to interoperate. There was a dispatcher at the State Fair Police building or public safety building where they were able to monitor not just the State Patrol, but the Fair Police and Des Moines as well. So that kind of worked out pretty nicely. Busy, system was heavily utilized, but we had no issues to report. So other than that, basically we're trying to get a lot of sites done and built before the end of the year. And the biggest thing is we want to definitely integrate Woodbury, which we're going to be syncing up with the user group committee and also when we have the fleet mapping meeting in the middle of October.
Okay.
All I had. Questions?
Thanks,
Thank you.
Bill. Move on to old business, the truck for the STR that has been delivered to our fleet and supply. We're putting plates on it. And we'll arrange for the payment to be taken out of our 220A, which is our interoperability fund, of sum of $5,000, which was approved. We don't have a home for the West trailer right now, so I plan on taking that truck, hooking it up and parking it at our Atlantic Communications Center alongside the building, hooked up to the truck so it's ready to go. And if somebody can volunteer to if they have a building somewhere in western Iowa that would like to house that for us with the truck, that'd be super. Otherwise, it's gonna have to sit outside this winter, hooked to that truck. It is an F-350 gas truck, so we shouldn't have a problem with the cold weather and the diesel, but we have 24/7 there, so we could have people go out and starting it up and making sure it runs and plugged into the building, so it's important to keep the batteries up. ISI committee, I'll turn that back to Craig, the SWIC, if you give us an update on that. Still under old business?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yes, Captain Walter and I attended an a Federal Partnership for Interoperable Communications meeting in Florida last month with the specific interest of speaking with gentlemen from Connecticut and several federal partners about the use of the ISSI switch, how they used it, how it worked, how it might work as we look at it in Iowa. And it's one of those technologies that may not be right for our use right now not because the technology wouldn't be great, but because of the cost of the backhaul between the various systems. So every system has to be connected to every one of the cores, and there are 3 to the primary system and all of the other systems in Iowa seem to have a primary core and a backup. So if you can just imagine the number of telephone lines or microwave connections that would be necessary to tie all that together, exclusive of the cost of the number of ports of any one of the systems might or might not have that accepts that resource, and then keeping those resources at the same level of software. Anyway, as we continue our research, we're looking at what other options we may be able to employ here in Iowa as opposed to deploying the ISSI switch, or if we may come up with another opportunity we hadn't thought of or haven't run into yet that would make the ISSI switch the best practice for us. But that's what we're looking at, and that's pretty much where we're at right now. And it was, Chair, I know you were at the meeting. I would be interested in anything that you had to say. I thought that Wally and I came away from that, particularly the afternoon session, with a great deal of additional information that there's just no way we would have gotten if we hadn't attended that.
Yeah, it was a great meeting. It's always good to network with the people that have already done it. And there are a lot of experts out there and a lot of best practice. So I'm confident that your committee, along with the CIO, will find their best solution for us. Just to remind the board, we do have one ISSI, and ISSI connects systems to systems. It's part of our ISICS platform. It's just we're trying to find out by forming this committee what's the best way to utilize that for our system here. So the goal is interoperability. We have different systems in Iowa. We like to make sure that they talk to each other, and that's one way of doing it. It may not be the best, but that's the committee's job to find out what is the best. So, any questions on that? Okay, Y Schools, I can take this one. The Y Schools is a Wi-Fi internet for school emergencies. We kicked that off here a couple months ago. The governor, in fact, had a press conference on the Y Schools initiative. It's in Ted's neck of the woods. It's one of the schools in Marshalltown High School. The other ones are Norwalk and Martinsdale. The goal of the program is using the ICN Part 3 connections that exist at the school to throw a Wi-Fi signal into the air to use for public safety only, either on a day-to-day operational use for downloading video or pictures, or just simply sitting in the parking lot using the connection there to do your work on a daily basis. For us, it'll be a big, for the State Patrol specifically, we download a tremendous amount of video daily to our servers, and it's a pretty big pipe to use, so it goes fairly quickly. So we're working out all the ways to do that, the fastest way to do that. And the benefit is public safety is now in and around the schools, because we're doing on a daily basis. So we're getting real good press on it because it's now become a national kind of in a spotlight here. So that's another big deal that this board is handling and involved with is this initiative with the Y Schools. It's going to be a year long. We'll test it. We'll try to bring it to its knees as far as the users, how many users can actually shut it down, what devices can be used on it. And so it's huge benefits. The schools are excited about it. I already had phone calls from other schools that are interested in it. So it is going to really, hopefully, be a good pilot project for us. If anybody has any questions on that, just give me a call, or Sean's involved in it on the outreach piece. Ted's been involved in it with Marshalltown. The chief of Marshalltown's been involved in it. Norwalk, it was a real good press conference we had a couple weeks ago here in Des Moines on that kickoff. Okay. Let's move on to new business. The first order up on Section A is the Office of Chief Information Officer website billing. A while back, our board, we were originally, if you can remember, bring back history here, the board contracted with a company to develop a website off a Drupal platform in Des Moines. They built that for us. At the time, in a short time later, advanced the clock ahead a little bit, we decided to go over to the state's Drupal platform because they were moving to the states, was moving to Drupal, but therefore we had Drupal. So it was a good idea that we jump on board with that. The issue we're having now is we just have to work out some billing issues. We've been billed some things that I have looked at that maybe we shouldn't be responsible for, or there was a misunderstanding on should we be paying this, or were we actually responsible for this in regards to building the website and or fixing things that didn't work on the website and things that we wanted. So at this level now, I've contacted the OCIO, Robert Von Wolfrat, and we've discussed this. And I'm going back and forth on email now to make sure that's an accurate billing for us. So we may be receiving a bill. Until I get that finalized, I don't want to give you a number now. In order to take it out of our budget, we're going to have to pay something here, but I don't know what that number is. And also discuss future fixes. What is the charge for a future, if we need something changed on our website, what is it going to cost us? All that's being discussed right now, so we know what we're getting into here. We have to have a functioning website, as you know how important it is with LMR. People are going to go to that website to look for radio information, FirstNet information, and now Y Schools. So it has to be a functioning, easy to use website. So, any questions on that? Okay. Now we'll move on to section B, consolidation funding for ISICS users. We've talked about this. I was asked to sign one of the signers for the board for the consolidation effort. So when they're purchasing radios and getting consolidation funding for the radios, they're consolidating with the state platform by using that radio on the platform. In order to sign that, I needed to get approval from the board, and because I'm sure this is probably the first you've heard of this, it was brought to me a couple of weeks ago to do that. So in order to do that, you're considered to be a user if you're going to put a radio on our network. So if you're a user, we need to kick in a process which we all been talking about. Is the letter of intent to myself. I push that to Andy, the chair of the UGC committee, and he takes it from there. The committee approves it and brings it to the board for approval. So that will be the process. In order for me to sign that, I wasn't going to sign it on behalf of the board without bringing it up at a board meeting. So I put it under new business, and I'll open it up for discussion if we have any questions. And Andy, you can jump in certainly if you need to.
Can I ask a question and clarification?
Go ahead.
Is this for operational or interoperational use? Like if an agency wants to use the network for themselves, or is this for just people who are going to need to talk on it for interoperability if something goes down in their jurisdiction?
That's part of the application process. He will ask that entity, what is your intentions here?
Okay, but I mean, for those of us, anybody out there who's not going to necessarily be on Iowa's network, new network, but yet we're going to need to talk to you just like we do on mutual aid.
Mm-hmm.
We have to apply for that? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
Access to the system through the user group committee. There's a matrix of users that's required to fill out. There's 4 levels. Level 1 is just interoperable only. Level 2 is basically some operations. You're going to have some on your system. When you get to level 3, you're dealing with communication centers and daily operations. Your level 4 is you're going to be adding infrastructure. You're going to be adding towers and things like that.
And I'll certainly be happy to sign that consolidation application as soon as that approval comes back. If we refer back to Blake's, there was 17 applicants and 5 of those want to jump on the ISICS with radios. So I will forward all those. I forwarded you some already for you guys to take on. Okay. The last thing I have here under new business is, and I added today, was the consultant funding. And we're down to, we approved $50,000 to retain federal engineering for consultant funding and consultant advice for the ISIC system. We've used up about 40,000 of it, so we're down to about 10,000. So we need to replenish that, and I was hoping the Finance Committee would be on the call today, or at least a representative, so they can report to you if they even talked about it at the committee, because I asked them to. But I can tell you we're down about $10,000. So I do need to, at some point, and we don't have to make the decision today, that we repopulate that fund to get federal engineering to keep them on, because we do need them for the DDR coming up in October, and we do call upon them every once in a while when there's a question what it has to do with the system or the RFP process or with the vendor, which is Motorola. So,
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
I attended the Finance Committee meeting. I'm uncomfortable giving their report, but I will say that there was a discussion that you just discussed, the previous billings have been less than $10,000 for attendance at meetings similar to this, and the committee recommended that we move forward, and at the next meeting, after we have a billing, that we then determine what amount of money we would be asking for to replenish the fund for their future activities.
Okay, we'll do
So
that.
they did discuss it, and the plan was to come before the board at our October meeting.
Okay. So just to reiterate, there's the $10,000 that we have left. There will be enough to cover the DDR, and they're going to present another figure at the next board meeting.
Yes, sir. That was my understanding of the discussion. They'd have clear understanding of after we had a billing and an understanding from the DDR. They felt that the $10,000 was within the range of what they had been charged in the past for similar attendance.
Okay. All right. We're on to public comment. Open it up to the public. If anybody has anything, you can address the board. If not, we'll get out of here. I try to get these down to an hour and a half, and we're not back to 2 hours again. But that's good stuff. Rick, you did an excellent job. I'm sure the board got a good 101 because I think we needed that because we've been progressing and we have some new members. So great job. Okay, need a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
Adjourned.